Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. I have one interesting and fascinating video today because I have the all-new 2023 Toyota Crown, which is a new flagship for Toyota. But I also have, believe it or not, a 2002 Toyota Century beside me. This belongs to my cousin and I'm borrowing it for a week or so. So I thought it would be really interesting to compare the Toyota Crown against the old Toyota Century. This is a new flagship. This is the old flagship. We still don't have a Century here in North America. They continue to sell the Century in Japan, but obviously this one is 2002, so it's quite an old car. But how does it compare in terms of the manufacturing quality against the Crown? I'm also going to talk about how the Crown drives because it has the new 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with hybrid system. And a lot of you guys are curious about this powertrain because this Hybrid Max is going into so many new Toyota models. So let me talk about the Crown and kind of reference back to the Century so you can figure out once and for all, is the Crown truly a new flagship? Let's go. Welcome back. So first, let's do a quality check on the new Toyota Crown. This one is built in Japan, and because it's a flagship of Toyota, I expect nothing short of perfection in terms of the quality of the paint and the body panel and alignment. Let's take a look. First, I'm going to measure the gap of the panels as I always do. And it is about 3.5 millimeter here and 3.1 millimeter or so here. But more than that, alignment in terms of panel, it's near perfect. I can't see any kind of defect. I'll talk about the paint a little bit later on. Just for curiosity's sake, let's go and measure on this side. And it should be about the same. It's 3 millimeter here and actually 3.3 millimeters. So again, in terms of the actual alignment of the panels and so forth, really good. Let's do a check on the between the front door and the front fender, which is 3.8 millimeter, 3.6 millimeter, and 3.6 millimeter. And you'll notice they put a gasket between the door here and here to kind of provide maximum sound deadening. Now let's take a look at Toyota Century, which is a 2002 model, so this is pretty old, but it was hand-built at the plant called Higashi Fuji, which is a plant I've been a number of times. I actually watched this thing being built some years ago. They don't have that plant anymore. That factory has been shut down because in that location, Toyota is developing a brand new prototype city called the Woven City. So the factory is gone now, but there's a whole new R&D center being built in that location. But let's take a look at the gap here. And I know the car is a little bit dirty. I just picked this up just a few minutes ago. It's 2.9 millimeter here and 2.8 millimeters. So ridiculously good gap. And once again, this thing is hand built to the highest standard for Toyota. So I expect nothing short of perfection as well. 3 millimeter there and about 3 millimeter here as well, and the fender to door is 3 millimeter and a little bit wider here at 3.5. So for a car that is, you know, over 2 decades old, the quality of the panel, the alignment is still perfect. Maybe this car might have gone through some kind of adjustment over the years in terms of hood or the door, but as it stands right here, all the panel looks perfect and it looks really well built. The paint quality is something else because obviously this is aged now and you can see some oxidation in the paint. But let's come back to the Crown now and look at the paint job. And again, I expect nothing short of perfection for a Crown because it's a flagship built to the best Japanese standard. But let's take a look at the reflection of the paint first. It is near perfect. The car is a little bit dirty again, so I apologize for that. Also, really good level of clear coat. The clear coat looks really just the right amount, has a really good reflection. And as you look at the reflection from the fender to the door to the rear door, I see absolutely zero defect. And there's not much orange peel. Orange peel is the texture of the orange peel, literally. And you don't see too much of that. Is at a minimum, which also indicate just a great paint adhesion and paint application. I'm going to measure the paint thickness in a moment here to see how it is. But in terms of all the components, the plastic components, the mirrors, these parts as well, and how the grille fits, I can't find a single defect. Over to the Toyota Century side, the paint has been oxidized, so it's definitely not a fair comparison to do that right now. I'm still going to measure the paint thickness because I'm curious how thick the paint is. But I know from visiting this factory, when I see this car brand new coming off the assembly line, it's got this ridiculous gloss because they add additional clear coat and they keep polishing and polishing by hand until it's like a mirror finish. So I know the brand new Toyota Century has ridiculously good paint job. But on this one, it just needs some kind of a paint correction and some repair, I think, to make it to a high standard. But it looks pretty good, and there's almost no orange peel as well, I can tell. This is the original paint, and so there hasn't been any kind of repair work on it as far as I know. But let's measure the paint thickness for both cars, and then let's get into some more details. So now I have the paint thickness gauge. Let's see how thick the paint is on the crown, and then just for fun, we check against the Century as well. So here we are on the Toyota Crown, 158 micron. That's actually a little bit thicker than normal, and I would expect that because this one has a special two-tone paint, which I like it a lot. It's not for everyone, but I think it's cool on the Crown. And so this one would have extra layer of paint anyway. Front fender is 130, also a little bit thicker than normal Toyota cars. Let's just do a couple more checks here. 132, almost exactly the same, and one more. 135. So the paint thickness is almost exactly identical across the sideway here. And normally paint job is between 100 to 150 microns to be ideal. Most Toyota cars are actually about 100 to 110, maybe 120. So this one definitely have a little bit thicker paint than normal Toyota cars, probably with a thicker clear coat, or there might be additional clear coat added onto this particular car. What about the Toyota Century? Just for fun, what was it like back in early 2000 in terms of paint thickness? 222, which is not quite twice as thick as that one, but definitely twice as thick as normal Toyota cars. What about over here? 205, also pretty thick. And here, 170. So I'm not gonna go and check every panel on the Century, but it's definitely 50% to maybe close to 100% thicker than most other Toyota cars. But the Crown is actually very good as well. The thickness is clearly more than usual, but more importantly, just the quality of the paint is absolutely excellent. Let's take a look inside, see how the quality is, and we go for a short drive. Okay, so now I'm inside the Toyota Crown, which is obviously a very important part of the Crown model because this is supposed to be flagship, supposed to give us that sense of pride and joy, driving something that is unique. Because the name Crown means a lot. Having grown up in Japan, for example, the Crown was always one of the cars we admire because it always stood for something. Even though I agree that the Toyota Century and the Century name might be higher than Crown, most of us would have never imagined buying a Century because that is really designed to be like a corporate chauffeur-driven car. So most of us wouldn't think about owning or buying a Century, but the Crown, if you own it, meant you made it in Japan when we were growing up. It's had so much reputation and legacy. So I think the name is very important. But in terms of the interior design, I'll do my usual punch test here to see if anything is loose. And obviously I don't expect anything to be loose. You see a little bit of sound here, but that is not going to contribute to rattles and squeak because this car was completely quiet when I'm driving. And all the material selection looks really good. Even the selection of the leather and the mixture of Nulex materials looks absolutely fantastic. You can see the quality of the actual plastic materials also, and the feel of the buttons, very tactile, very, very logically minded. I like the fact that everything has a proper button for temperature, for radio. Although I will admit that I was never too crazy about the shifting of the transmission. This is similar to what some of the newer Toyota cars have. And it's a little bit awkward, but all the buttons work well, and ergonomically is really well designed. Interesting enough, because it's kind of a maybe Japanese focused model in some way, the cup holders is way smaller than maybe some of the North American design and built vehicles. You can even remove this little shelf and make this longer, but when you put this back in, the actual cup holder is actually quite small. But functionality wise, everything is good. I do admit that it looks a little bit plain, and maybe that is the style they're trying to go for in terms of Crown. They're not trying to look super opulent or very, very luxurious. They want to give it a European look. I think really what they're trying to do with the Crown is that it's going to compete with something like Audi A5 Sportback. I think that's sort of the goal they're trying to have, or BMW 3 Series, or maybe even the Mercedes C-Class. Even though this is like a crossover design, it has a real trunk. It's not a 5-door hatchback. So I think maybe the European influence is what they're trying to go after, and not try to make it look too much like a Lexus with wood and everything else. So I like the design. I think it looks really good, very functional. But does it look like a flagship Toyota in terms of the overall feel? Perhaps not. And maybe that is one downside of this particular new Crown series, is that they're trying to look too European and lost some of the feel of Lexus/Toyota flagship design. But you should be the judge in terms of whether you like this interior or not. Now let's take a quick look into the Century, and then we go for a drive. So just for fun, I'm in the Toyota Century now. This is 2002 models, and obviously this looks really outdated, but just look at the quality of the materials. Every single one of these wood panels are handmade, and it's real wood, not the synthetic wood. And you can tell everything matches because they have to actually physically match up the wood grain along all these parts. So it's a huge amount of work to get it to this point of quality. And even though this one has 175,000 kilometers, which is just under 110,000 miles, it still looks really good inside. Like all Toyota Century, we don't get leather, we get real wool, so that you get this comfortable seat, and it stays somewhat cool in summer and warmer in the wintertime compared to leather. And so that's the tradition of a Century. It uses wool all over the car. But the quality of the material, wow, it's all still solid. Look at it, everything feels so solid. It's just absolutely amazing to be in this car. And I'll talk about the driving in a second here after I drive the Crown and do a quick comparison. But let me show you the back seat here because it's really neat as well. So now I'm in the back seat of the Toyota Century, which is the most important part of this car because it's designed to be a chauffeur-driven vehicle. And you can see, once again, you get wool everywhere, but you get so many controls. Again, it's a little bit messy right now, but radio controls, temperature controls, and this thing goes down as well with some remote for some kind of a DVD and TV as well, which I think was removed from this car when they imported the car. Oh no, that's not true. The TV is actually here. There you go. I can actually play DVDs or some kind of a TV. If I was in Japan, it's got a TV antenna, so it actually works. It doesn't work here, obviously. So that's really cool. And the grab handles are all over the place. Look how big that grab handle is. It's not very small because it's all designed for the rear passenger. It's not a huge amount of space here, but I got the seat pretty far back. So normally you'll be sitting on that side with the seats all the way forward, and so you can have lots of space, and it's just a very comfortable place to be. Let's take a quick look at the back seat of the Crown and we go for a quick drive. Okay, so now I'm inside the Toyota Crown and the back seat here. And while it's not quite as roomy as a Century, because that's obviously a bigger car, it's actually pretty comfortable. I got lots of leg room in the back. Pretty good headroom, although this is coming down this way because of a sloping design. So with a big panel roof, obviously this is affected here. So anyone taller than, let's say, 6 feet might find this to be a little bit restrictive. But otherwise, it's pretty comfortable in terms of seats, the level of reclining, which is just about perfect. And then the support is actually pretty good as well. You get a bit of a side support on both sides, which is unusual because usually these cars are completely flat all the way through here. But once again, Toyota is going after a bit of a European feel, so the car has a different emphasis on the back seat. It's not always about trying to squeeze in 3 people, but instead it's trying to take care of the 1 or 2 passengers that might be in the back. I wouldn't call this a kind of chauffeur type car, even though in Japan they might use it for that purpose. I think here in North America it's obviously meant to be driven normally with a driver who is also the owner and not having to drive someone in the back. But I think the back seat is comfortable and the front seats are also well designed. So that's the Crown. Now let's take both cars for a quick drive and see how much difference there is between a brand new flagship Toyota and then the old flagship Toyota. So now I'm inside the Crown, and this is perhaps one of the most interesting part to talk about because a lot of people are asking me, is the Crown truly a flagship in terms of feel on the road? And I do have to admit that when I first drove the prototype Crown some time ago, it didn't feel as impressive, but this one, which is a finished model, feels way better than the prototype model. It's refined, quiet, really well calibrated suspension, And I'm even beginning to like the 2.4 liter turbo hybrid, which is called a Hybrid Max. This engine is a big departure from V6 engines of the past, but it has a really good torque and power, and when you step on the gas, it takes off pretty good, as I will show you in a second here. When I step on it, yeah, good acceleration and really good torque delivery because of the fact that the maximum output for torque and power happens at much lower RPM because of turbo design and the fact that hybrid is also helping and assisting with acceleration. And even though it's not a V6 engine, it's actually very quiet, refined, and it's very comfortable to ride in. The only thing I would comment is that unlike, let's say, Lexus ES or some other past luxury cars from Toyota or Lexus, it has a very agile feel to it. So I can feel the road a lot more than I expected. And therefore, it once again feels more like a European car than a Japanese car. And I'm pretty sure that was the intent for Toyota to maybe migrate the Crown from a traditional and a typical Japanese vehicle to more of a European/international vehicle with a different flavor. If that was the purpose of this new Crown, they have definitely managed to achieve that goal because it's very flat around the corner and it stays agile regardless of the type of road conditions. So I actually really enjoy driving it a lot more than I thought of the Crown, because when you drive other big sedans in general, none of them really drives really well, whether it's from Toyota or from other brands, because they're just too soft for my taste anyway. But this one has a really good feedback. Even the steering, which is pretty light, has a decent amount of feedback from the road. And when I make a quick left and right turn like this, the body swings quickly as well. And so overall, I would say this car is the sportiest and the most agile flagship Toyota to ever come out from this brand. And therefore, it's a big departure from the past focus, which was to create the most comfortable and the softest and the most luxurious feel when it comes to previous vehicles like the Avalon or the current Lexus ES. So I'm really glad that Toyota has shifted its direction and the focus, because it makes the Crown stand out among many luxury models available out there. Now, is this car truly competitive enough with other European models from BMW, Audi, Mercedes, etc.? That's something that we'll have to wait and see, because a lot of people don't even know what Crown is, and therefore the expectation is a little hard to measure. But in terms of overall driving, I'm actually very impressed with it. Now let's go for a fun drive in the Toyota Century, not as a direct comparison, but just to see what the Century feels like on the road. So now I am driving the Toyota Century, which is a very fascinating experience because it is a right-hand drive vehicle for one, but also because it's a V12 engine and it's designed for a kind of chauffeur-driven environment, and it feels nothing else like on the road. And I always love the Century for what it stands for. It is absolutely the most iconic flagship from Toyota. And we all grew up being inspired by the Century because you know that every time you saw one, there's someone important sitting in the back. It is a cool car that hasn't changed over the years, but of course there was a new generation model introduced several years ago, and that one is a very different kind of Century perhaps, but it still have a V12 engine, and that is the biggest difference between Century and anything else out there. This is like the Rolls-Royce of a Toyota car, and that really shows up in the driving here. It's super soft, very comfortable, and it has air suspension, so I don't feel anything on the road. It literally floats over the road here, and even though I don't get a lot of feedback in terms of the steering feel, it has a decent amount of feedback just because it's a hydraulic power steering instead of the newer electric power steering. So I still get a sense of which way this car is headed, and it has just the overall amazing feel. It's very quiet, and I just have to remember that the left stalk is wiper and the right stalk on the steering is the turn signal, so there's a few adjustments to make, but otherwise it's pretty comfortable driving it, and I can only imagine for a passenger in the back how wonderful the experience will be with this pure wool as a material, a very quiet interior, and just a really amazing experience because the V12 is just so amazingly smooth and refined. You step on the gas and it just kind of takes off but in a manner that's very different from a turbocharged engine of the current generation models from Toyota, such as the Toyota Crown that I was driving. So I can't really compare this to anything else out there. Certainly very difficult to compare this to the 2023 Crown I'm driving as a comparison, because the two models are just a very different type of vehicle and obviously many generations apart. Do I enjoy driving the Century? Actually, I do, from a very different perspective from a Crown. But would I buy one and own one and use it as an everyday car? Maybe not, because it is very big for a Toyota car. It's very soft, and obviously being right-handed drive, not easy to navigate, even for someone like me who's used to driving a right hand. But the interesting thing is that this one has 175,000 kilometers, or just under 110,000 miles, but it still feels like a brand new vehicle. It is not a squeak or rattle anywhere. The engine just purrs, and the suspension and the ride still feels like a brand new vehicle. And that's perhaps the most astonishing part of the Century. It's built like a tank, built like a Rolls-Royce, and most likely it will last many decades to come. I hope that's also true for the Toyota Crown, which is brand new, and so we can't really tell for sure what's the long-term reliability is. But because it's built in Japan and because it's a flagship Toyota, I'm very confident the Crown will also last many decades to come. So that is my quick, fun comparison between the all-new Toyota Crown, which is a flagship for Toyota here in North America in terms of a luxury model, compared against the Toyota Century, which was and it still is the flagship model for Toyota in Japan. So even though it wasn't meant to be a direct comparison between the V12 powered Toyota Century and a turbocharged four-cylinder Crown with a hybrid max engine, it was kind of fun to do a quick comparison between the two and see how things have evolved and changed over the years. I was surprised how much I enjoy driving the Crown compared to when I first drove it, which was a prototype, because this one is so refined, so quiet, but actually quite fun to drive for a big sedan. What do you guys think of the Crown and the whole meaning behind the brand? The Crown is meant to be like a sub-brand for Toyota in many ways, the way maybe Akio Toyoda envisioned it, because he has lots of fond memories of the Crown growing up. So I think that's why he wanted to leave some kind of legacy here. But I'm kind of curious to see what you think of the name brand as well as what the Crown stands for. Don't forget that Toyota will introduce other variations of the Toyota Crown. We don't know which one is coming to North America yet, but my bet is on the Crown Sport or Crown SUV, which looks fantastic because it looks like a combination of a Ferrari in the front and a Porsche Macan in the back. But perhaps other models will come our way, and that could really strengthen the Crown name. For now, I'm going to sign off, but if you can give me a thumbs up and make some comments, that would be appreciated. And if you haven't done so yet, would you kindly subscribe as well? And that would be truly appreciated. Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.